Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Claim Game podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Zug. And as a reminder, every so often we like to take a pause and get a behind the scenes look at the game board that we're playing by talking to game designers. But we also like to consult game changers, people that know this industry really well. They know how to navigate it. They've done it for a long time, and they have a lot of valuable information to offer. These special rounds offer invaluable insights into the design and development of the healthcare landscape. And by interviewing these people, the payers, regulators, key players, we can gain a deeper understanding of the rules and nuances of healthcare and the board. This knowledge gives us a significant advantage, allowing you to navigate the terrain with greater clarity and make more informed strategic decisions. So get ready to learn from the game makers and enhance your understanding of the claim game. Today's game changer is Kelley Sonnenberg, and Kelley is very special to Practice Solutions. She's our billing director. She started with the company in 2018. So she's been with us for a very long time. And she was hired as one of our very first billing specialists, working hands-on with providers to manage their billing before moving into her current role as the billing director, where she manages teams of billers and supervises all the billing work. Her experience as a biller gave her the knowledge, skills, and passion to help expand Practice Solutions. And as a result, we've helped hundreds and thousands of mental health providers. She hopes to empower providers to gain the confidence and knowledge to take on insurance billing. And this episode is absolutely vintage Kelley Sonnenberg. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy this episode of The Claim Game. All right, Kelley, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. For everybody listening, Kelley has been with Practice Solutions for, how long has it been?
7 years.
7 years. Kelley is our billing director. She's done billing for a long time now. And tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up at Practice Solutions.
Sure, yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to be in the healthcare kind of industry. I originally went to school for nursing, and so I had a lot of hands-on experience with patients themselves. I quickly realized that I wanted to operate in more of a background setting and not work directly with patients. And so I switched kind of to more of the healthcare administrative side of things. And then I graduated with a degree in healthcare administration. And so at that time, then I found you and Catherine and Practice Solutions, and you all took me on, started as one of the first billers, and kind of just grown with the company ever since. And I love helping people and patients, especially in the healthcare industry, and I found working on more of that administrative side of things was definitely my strong suit.
Yeah, awesome. How many billers are you currently corralling at Practice Solutions?
Yeah, I've got about 23 billers on our team.
Yeah, that's a lot. Oof. So that's like a small army of billers for sure. And one of the topics that we talk about a lot internally and with clients is eligibility and benefits, and you know this process very well. And I'll start with a little bit of a controversial question, but who should be responsible for the eligibility and benefit check? Is it the practice or the patient?
Ooh, that's a good question. I can definitely see how it's controversial. I think it comes down to a matter of opinion. Personally, I feel that the patient should be ultimately responsible for knowing and understanding their own benefits, because they're the ones who signed up for that plan, signed up for those benefits. They should know and fully understand how those operate. So I always tell our providers, encourage your patients to reach out to their home plan and their insurance company to have them explain the benefits fully, ask them, the representatives at the insurance company, any questions that the patient might have. They're going to be the best people, the representatives there to explain those benefits to the patient. Now, however, I also believe, though, that it is best practice for the practices as well to do eligibility and benefit checks. And I think that for a couple of reasons. First, I think it's just good customer service as a courtesy to your patients to do eligibility and benefits for them. But even more so, I think it acts as a safeguard for your practice for when it comes to billing and claims reimbursement. So if you have a patient, the patient might come in stating that they have insurance and they give you an insurance card. And if you don't check their verification, you might see that patient for a few sessions, and then, after the claims come back, you realize that their insurance is not active. And so ultimately, the patient is responsible for paying those sessions, but at the end of the day, it falls on the provider to track down the patient to pay for those sessions. And if they're not able to do so, then the provider ends up losing out on those claims. Where if they were able to do a verification check at the beginning, they would have realized that that patient's plan is inactive, and they probably wouldn't have seen the patient or would have set up a direct pay rate there. So I think it kind of goes on both sides. The patient should know their benefits, but the practice should also be aware of how the claims might process and for claim reimbursement.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because would a patient on an eligibility check be able to tell that a provider is in network with the plan or no?
Ooh, that's a good question. A lot of times, yeah, they should be able to figure out if they're in network with the insurance. They can give the provider's name to the representative at the insurance company. But ultimately, the practice is probably going to be the ones who fully know what plans they take and are going to be able to verify that they're in network with that specific.
Yeah, for sure. Another question, this is sort of an ad hoc question, but oftentimes we work with new practices and they seem to think that eligibility and benefits are sort of like a magic bullet or like a skeleton key to getting paid. How reliable, would you trust an eligibility and benefits check? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
No, never.
No. Okay.
I think industry-wide, they say eligibility and benefit checks are about 70% accurate. So I think it's a good first step, but it's definitely not a guarantee in any way. Because at the end of the day, you can get your benefits at the beginning, but it's all going to be subject to change depending on, the CPT code, the diagnosis code, the provider that's seeing the patient. Things might change during the claim processing time where those benefits might differ.
Right.
Also, you might check benefits today and the patient owes the deductible, but tomorrow they met their deductible because something happened. So it's kind of an ever-changing thing. So it's never going to be 100% accurate. I think it's just a good base to start. You do catch a lot of things and a lot of errors on the front end there that are preventable. So I think it helps in that aspect.
Yeah, for the 30% of eligibility checks that are inaccurate and a patient is seen and then they find out that they're out of network with the plan, what do you recommend is best practice to handle the claim that denied and then the patient relationship moving forward?
Yeah, it kind of depends on why the claim denied. So if it's you're out of network with the insurance plan, you can do out of network benefits if the patient has them, or you can discuss a direct pay rate with the patient. For out of network, you can also do like a sliding fee scale and charge the patient less rate. So there's just different options depending on the reason for the denial.
Yeah, that's awesome. A lot of practices, especially smaller ones, are spending a lot of time every week just on this process, eligibility benefit verification. And I think what we hear a lot is that they feel as if they're just checking a box, but mistakes, as we've talked about, derail the entire revenue cycle. So what's like one common error that providers make?
Yeah, I think the biggest error, most common error is confirming your network status with that specific plan. Because, like in Michigan, for example, we have Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, but we also have Blue Care Network of Michigan, which is the HMO version. And a provider or patient, they say they have Blue Cross Blue Shield, they have a Blue Cross Blue Shield card. The provider thinks they're a network, knows they're a network with Blue Cross Blue Shield, but it turns out it's actually Blue Care Network, which is a different separate credentialing contract that they have to enroll in. So making sure that you're confirming the specific plan, especially with Optum too, there's so many different Optum plans. Are you in network with that specific EPO plan or whatever it is that the patient has, because it'll change their benefits. So if you're not in network with that specific plan, you're making sure that you're checking their out-of-network benefits, or confirming that if you are in network, you're checking your in-network benefits. Another thing that kind of along the same lines here is carve outs.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is where carve outs come into play as well. So a carve out is when a patient has a certain medical insurance, say it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, but their mental health benefits are carved out to a separate insurance company. And then those benefits and claims are going to process under the policies of that insurance company. So when I know, I think it's in Alabama, Blue Cross Blue Shield, a lot of mental health plans on their Blue Cross Blue Shield are carved out to Magellan. So you want to double check, are you in network with Magellan then? If not, you're getting out of network benefits. Yeah, so there's a lot of kind of caveats.
Yeah. It's like a subcontractor, right? That's the concept, that you have Blue Cross, but then in order to, I don't know, manage their cost or slow the spend, they subcontract out to Magellan. That's crazy.
Yep, exactly.
How would you know that on the front end, or do you just have to stumble over the first patient?
Yeah, I will say it's probably one of the more difficult things because it's not as glaringly obvious.
Yeah.
Like when you pull up benefits on a portal, it doesn't like in big letters tell you like, no, this is a carve out. It should, and sometimes it does. I have found like on Availity, sometimes it'll say, call this number for mental health benefits. But another way to know too is I always recommend obtaining a copy of the patient's front and back of their insurance card and calling that mental health provider number on the back of the insurance card. And it might not say like Magellan on it, but when you call it, the person who's answering is Magellan, and so you'll know it's a carve out. So either the portal or calling the number on the back of the card, and then or two, you submit your first claim and it denies, and then you find out it's carve out.
Yeah. I mean, you said something important there. So collecting the front and back of the insurance card, why is that important?
Yeah, it is important. One, for carve outs too. So we have the most direct line. So the front of the card, we have, the ID number, the name of the plan on it. That's important. However, the back of the card for admin and billers purposes is equally as important because it has that direct provider phone number for us to call. For Optum, if you were to call Optum, there's a bunch of different phone numbers for Optum, because there's so many different plans. And having the back of that insurance card and that specific phone number, you're not being transferred to 20 different people to check benefits. You have the most direct line.
That's so true. That's a great point. One thing that's come up a lot, right? So we're now entering the age of AI and AI scribing. But before that, the latest sweep through the tech stack was eligibility and benefit checks at your fingers, right? So every EHR was building in some sort of E&B tool. Are those reliable? Not reliable? You like those? How are those tools relative to what you've seen in the industry?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that more and more EHRs are implementing their own eligibility and benefit check process internally. Personally, I find them a little confusing and not as accurate. And the reason for that is, I wonder where are they pulling that information from? Probably a third-party software. So that third-party software is pulling it from somewhere else. That's pulling it into the EHR. So it's probably not the most up-to-date, real-time benefit accumulation. The other issue that I see with those is when you pull the benefits in the EHR, it'll give you an entire list of all of the patient's benefits for every specialty, pages and pages of benefits. So it can get rather difficult just to kind of translate and interpret the benefits, trying to find the specific benefits that you're looking for. You're kind of reading between the lines and how to interpret the information. So it's just not easy to read, I find. And again, it doesn't necessarily have the most up-to-date information. It's hard to understand and read. So I always recommend utilizing the payer-specific portal. So most payers have their own portal. Like it has a Cigna portal, Optum has the Optum portal. A lot of payers now utilize Availity as well. I find Availity has pretty easy to read benefits. They're more up-to-date and accurate. You can specifically check outpatient mental health benefits in there. So yeah, you're just getting more accurate and easy to read information.
Yeah, because on the tools that EHRs build themselves, you can't just take for whatever specialty you're in, right? Mental health or ER or whatever, you can't just take the first like deductible copay coinsurance that you see, right? You
Right.
may not know what applies to whatever specialty. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It doesn't, but it gives you everything, but you don't know
Mhm.
exactly what applies and what doesn't apply.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Once you have like you know that somebody's active and you get the benefits for the specialty that you're in, how do you translate terms like deductible, copay, coinsurance into a conversation with the patient where they understand that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as far as like the practice goes to tell their patient what they owe, I feel like just keeping it in very layman's terms, you have a $20 copay, or you have a deductible. Our rate for an hour session is around $150. You can expect to owe $150 a session. Kind of keeping it more simple of exactly what they're going to owe each session. I think if the patient has more complex questions about their benefits, what is a deductible? What is a copay? What does that mean? Again, directing them to talk to their insurance company's home plan for further clarification around what all of that means. So just giving the patient, a dollar amount and letting them know, this can change. If you hit your deductible, then you'll move on to a $20 copay. Keeping it more simple. But for the sake of education purposes here, I can give you kind of my layman's terms of how I interpret the deductible copay and all of that. So I like to look at it kind of like a game, and there's 3 levels to this game. So level 1 is your deductible. Level 2 is your copay and coinsurance. And then level 3 is your out-of-pocket maximum. The goal is to get to level 3 because that means you're covered at 100%. So depending on your benefits will dictate what level you start at. So level 1 being your deductible. If your deductible applies, you'll have to meet that deductible in order to move on to either level 2 or level 3. If your deductible does not apply or you've met it, then you'll go to level 2, either your copay or your coinsurance amount. And that copay and coinsurance will apply to your out-of-pocket maximum. And then once level 3, your out-of-pocket maximum is met, then you're covered at 100%. So if your out-of-pocket maximum is $10,000 a year as a patient, you will never pay more than $10,000 out of your pocket for that plan year with insurance. Kind of, you move from level 1 to 2 to 3, but some benefits you start at level 2, some benefits you start at level 3, and you don't have to go through all those levels. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and at level 3, you're sort of like the Oprah of therapy. It's like you get a session, you get a session, you get a session. I love it. No, that makes a lot of sense. I love the game language and how you stratify that. That makes a lot of sense for sure.
One mistake in your notes can cost you a reimbursement. Blueprint helps providers avoid that by writing smarter documentation, flagging issues early, and getting claims out the door faster. Check the show notes for the link to give it a try for free.
Let's back up a little bit. Let's say that you're talking to a big group practice and things have gotten out of control, right? Big aging, like lots of claims that are getting old, no process for eligibility and benefit checks. What do you think is the first place to start to cleaning up the eligibility and benefit process when you walk into a billing mess?
Yeah. Well, you are talking to the SOP queen here. My first and foremost rule is to create a standard operating procedure for the process itself. I am a big believer in that your practice should function around the process rather than around the person. So if you create a process for eligibility and benefits, one, I would start with creating a solid intake process so that you have the information that you need in order to complete the eligibility and benefit check process. So that's patient demographic information, patient insurance information, including the front and back of their insurance card. And once you have that, you'll create your eligibility and benefit process. With that, I always recommend getting a template so that every time that you're checking benefits, you're making sure you're checking all of these things on the template. I know we actually have a template on the Practice Solutions Learning Hub that you can use as well. But some things to look out for on that template, I always like to have the effective date, when did the patient's plan start, their termination date, their deductible, copay, coinsurance, out-of-pocket maximum. And then also I like to include on there if there's a limited amount of sessions. So if the patient only has 52 sessions a year, and then authorization as well. So especially if you're a testing facility, making sure that on your template, you're always checking for authorization for patients if it's required. And last, and most importantly, a place for the reference number. So if you're calling insurance, always get a reference number when they're providing you benefits. If you're checking it through a portal, sometimes there's transaction IDs, or at least just indicating where you received this information, and having that standardized template. So then your admin or your biller will constantly use that template every time, and they're always going to make sure that they're gathering the same information.
Nice.
And that way you can expand and grow from there.
Yeah, and that sounds like something that you can replicate over time. I think one of the problems that we see a lot is practices are using people, like what you said, they build jobs around people that are not duplicatable, right?
Yep.
When you have a process, you can do that 10 times. You can build a multi-site facility. You can keep your practice small. You can do whatever you want, which is ultimately the flexibility that you're going for. All right, let's talk about an advanced topic. So we're coming to the end of the year. New benefits are coming. People are choosing right now as we talk which benefits that they're going to go with, open enrollment. It's all frantic, right? Top of the year is going to come. Can you get accurate eligibility and benefit information before the top of the year for the new plan?
Unfortunately, typically, no, you cannot. A lot of times the insurance companies won't release it until that new year. We actually found a week ago, we were talking to some different insurance companies, and there are even some payers now that are saying that they won't release the benefits until the 15th of the year.
Whoa.
So we have to wait. Yeah, we found that out actually a couple weeks ago. So you're not going to be able to check the new year benefits. You'll have to wait until the first of the year, and then January kind of becomes crunch time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to really hustle before those first sessions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, if you have, a really large group practice, rerunning 500 benefit checks at the beginning of the year is going to be very difficult. So one thing I suggest there too, if you know your patient's plan is just going to renew, setting those accumulations, and then you'll know when that first claim comes back, where they're at, and you can kind of recheck benefits from there. But just resetting accumulations rather than rechecking their full benefits, at least to begin with, to kind of get on top of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then one of the most common denials we get in quarter one are coordination of benefits, COB. Can you talk us through what that means and how to fix that particular denial?
Yeah, coordination of benefits. So essentially what that means is we're talking like primary and secondary insurance here. And the patient has to coordinate with both primary and secondary which one's which. Your primary, your secondary. Primary should know that they're primary and that there's a secondary. Secondary should know that they're secondary and that there's a primary. Everybody should be on the same page. And so there becomes a lot of issues with coordination of benefits. And it doesn't necessarily always apply to primary and secondary. Usually yearly as a patient, you'll have to contact your insurance company, just confirm, yep, my address is the same, my demographic information is the same, and you're just confirming things once a year. And if that doesn't happen, then we'll get a denial for coordination of benefits, stating that the member has to contact their home plan and confirm their information on file. Now, typically when that happens, the patient will just call, confirm their information, and the claim will get reprocessed. Not a huge deal. When it comes to primary and secondary, the patient will have to contact both primary and secondary, get everybody on the same page, let us know for, who should we submit the claim to first, and things like that. There's also some different rules that come along with coordination of benefits. These are not necessarily rules that apply to everybody, but these are kind of the standard typical rules. So Medicaid is typically going to be secondary to whatever other primary you have on file. Medicare is typically going to operate as primary unless we have seen, if you have another insurance through your employer, that one might be primary, but typically Medicare is primary. And then there's the birthday rule as well. So the birthday rule is if you have mom and dad and a kid, mom has insurance, dad has insurance, whichever parent's birthday month comes first in the year, then that plan will be the primary. So if my birthday is in February, but my husband's birthday is in December, even though he's older than me, my plan comes first, so my child would have primary through my insurance. And dad's
birth year doesn't matter, right? It's not
Correct.
birth year, it's birth month
in the year. Okay. Yep. So that's how you determine those. And those are kind of just some different overlooked rules. And again, they might not apply to everybody, but those are typically basically the standard rules for coordination of benefits. But at the end of the day, it is the patient dictating which one's primary, which one's secondary, and making sure that they're all on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are great. I really appreciate those because those small nuances, those 5 millimeter shifts make such a huge difference in people's revenue cycle. Here's another eligibility and benefit question for you. And this is one I got recently, but having a multi-site practice that's becoming infinitely more popular.
Yeah.
People want to grow their companies. That makes sense. When you check eligibility, do you have to check for the site where the patient will be seen, or can you just check at the headquarters site?
I would check where the patient's going to be seen. Because that practice location is going to be credentialed under that address, under that NPI. So you want to make sure that they're specifically in network or with that plan.
How often does that become an issue? Like credentialing at different sites with certain providers? Is that a big issue? Does that slow down claim processing?
As you grow your practice, if you have good foundation in place, then it obviously becomes much easier to scale. Now, when it comes to credentialing multiple providers under multiple practice locations, it can definitely get a little convoluted. But if you have all of your ducks in a row, you have a good strategy plan, then it shouldn't be an issue.
How does number of payers, or I guess, volume of payers impact how hard the eligibility and benefit process is? Or is it just kind of the same across the board?
I think that it definitely can impact. The more payers you have, the more plans in question. So you're trying to, again, going back to confirming your network status with that specific plan. So the more you take, it can get, again, more convoluted. And so I always like to keep a spreadsheet of every plan name, if we're in or out of network, so we can keep track of that, especially as you go and add on more payers. But if you're limiting yourself to just 2 payers, you can get really good at checking those 2 payers' benefits. And you start to notice different trends with those payers. Okay, I'm noticing this alpha prefix. These are the typical benefits for that alpha prefix, and all the patients with that alpha prefix have these benefits. So you're able to pick up on those patterns and really get fully immersed in those benefits, how to interpret the benefits on the portal too. You can become an expert in that. But yeah, if you have 15 different payers, you're learning 15 different portals, trying to interpret 15 different benefit levels. So it can become a lot.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot. And when you say alpha prefix, what is that?
Yeah, so alpha prefix, specifically, primarily Blue Cross Blue Shield will have a lettered alpha prefix in front of their ID number, like XYQ or whatever, and it kind of distinguishes that specific.
Yeah, oh, interesting. Okay. Do other cards work the same? They all have alpha prefixes?
No, they do not. Every insurance company's ID number is going to look a little different. Yeah.
Oh, it's so wild. Are there any other insurance cards where there's an identifier of the plan, like the Blue Cross alpha prefix?
Yeah, typically on a copy of like the front of the patient's insurance card, it'll have the plan name on there. So if you have like an opt-in card, it'll say Open Access EPO Plan.
Nice.
And that's where I would copy down the plan name and kind of just start looking for patterns.
Yeah. And I think this time of year especially, it becomes important to know how you're credentialed with each plan, right? Because January 1st is coming, and that can really jazz you up for sure. Is there a single piece of information in the eligibility and benefit process that, if overlooked, can totally wreck up the claims process?
Good question. I will say, I think with most things in eligibility and benefits, you can kind of pivot. So, if your patient is inactive on the plan, well, it becomes your patient responsibility. I think that the one thing that might act as the game over piece is authorization. So as you're checking benefits, if a patient requires prior authorization and you didn't know that and didn't get prior authorization, it can lead to claim denials. And typically insurance companies will not provide backdated authorization.
Oof.
You end up, so you can get authorization moving forward, but they will not typically retro off. So you'll end up losing out on the payment for those claims. So always making sure, and this comes up a lot with psychiatric testing and testing codes like that, need authorization mostly. So just always confirming that you have authorization on file. Another distinguishing factor there is a referral. A PCP referral is not the same thing as an authorization. So you might have a PCP referral on file for the patient, but if you didn't get the prior authorization, that could still lead to claim denials. And that's probably one of the hardest things to overturn. Like I said, the insurance don't typically provide retroactive authorization.
Have you seen those? Have you ever successfully seen any of those be overturned?
I have seen retro authorization be offered. I will say it's not typical. Usually prior authorization is prior authorization. But there are times, especially with like the smaller insurance companies, that you might be able to work something out with them or get a single case agreement. Um, but they're not as forgiving with that. I have seen it happen though.
Yeah. You've probably seen every version of this roll out for sure.
Oh yeah.
So any other like thoughts on eligibility, any best practices you would recommend implementing in the eligibility and benefit process?
I think the main thing, especially if you're just starting out with your practice or doing eligibility and benefit checks, kind of like I mentioned, is creating just a spreadsheet with the different plans, noting what you're in and out of network with, and making sure you have a good template in place so you're checking all of the necessary information and looking for those patterns with different plans, just kind of getting yourself really familiar with how it works. I think if you're starting out too, one thing that I would recommend doing is I'll look up a patient's benefit in the payer portal, and then I'll also go and call the patient's plan just to confirm and make sure that I'm interpreting the portal correctly. Once you start feeling confident in your interpretation of the portal, then you won't have to call anymore. But even just doing that off the bat, just calling and using the portal until you really get familiar if you're just starting out, I think is super beneficial.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if those listening did one thing this week to immediately improve their process, like a quick win, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, what would or what have you seen that single most impactful action be?
I would say using a benefit template to make sure you get all of the information. Yep, you're not missing anything.
What do you see successful practices doing right now with all the shifts in the market and big MSOs? What are you seeing successful practices doing to continually grow their practices?
I think the main thing to continue to grow your practice is going back to those standard operating procedures and having a good foundation. Making sure that your practice is operating around those procedures so that you can add people on easily. They know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Everybody is on the same page with how things operate in your practice. And it really just allows for scalability and making sure that nothing in your practice is around one person. It's around the process.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I really love about having you on our team, Kelley, is that you always put the cookies on the bottom shelf. You know, it's not very hard to get the good stuff, you know.
Yep.
So thanks for being here, and thanks for joining in a conversation. If you have any questions for Kelley, you can reach out to us on the website, practicesol.com. And the other thing that we wanted to mention too is that if you're having a hard time explaining benefits to clients, we do offer a service that for billing clients only, we can explain benefits to patients, take payment, that kind of thing, save your admin time, even more time and space. So thank you, everybody. We look forward to seeing you here next time. Thank you, Kelley.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have two places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.